Let's travel back in time. The month is February 1966. And you have to imagine a whole continent shivering in a deep midwinter chill. But beneath that cold surface, something was really brewing. 60 years ago, continental Europe was this place of incredible contrast, caught between the heavy, heavy weight of the past and this vibrant, almost electric pulse of the future. So let's dive into this pivotal moment, a continent of incredible contrast.
So, on one hand, you had the Europe of the old guard. We're talking a world of rigid politics, complicated treaties, and, of course, deep Cold War divisions. But then, on the other hand, an unstoppable new wave was just crashing onto the shore, a world defined by pop music, rebellious fashion, and a totally revolutionary kind of cinema. And here's the thing, these two Europes weren't just coexisting side by side. Nope, they were on a collision course.
All right, first, let's step into that very serious world of the statesman. This was a Europe where pretty much every single move was a calculated play in the great game of Cold War diplomacy and power. It was a continent truly defined by division. And smack dab in the middle of this political stage was one man, French President Charles de Gaulle. I mean, this guy was a towering figure, the absolute embodiment of the old world. And by February 1966, he was at the peak of his powers, steering France on this fiercely independent course that, well, often drove his allies crazy. Now, de Gaulle's independent streak had led directly to this thing called the empty chair crisis. For months, France had been boycotting the forerunner to the EU, the European Economic Community. And why? Well, because de Gaulle was terrified that a centralized power in Brussels would just chip away at France's national sovereignty. He literally left France's chair at the table empty. And this brings us right to our focus month, February 1966, because this was the very moment this crisis was technically resolved. The Luxembourg Compromise had just been worked out, and it allowed France to come back to the table. But make no mistake, this was no happy reunion. The whole crisis left some deep scars on the project of European unity, showing everyone just how fragile it really was. And get this, even as one crisis was ending, de Gaulle was already prepping his next bombshell. He was just weeks away from announcing that France would withdraw from NATO's integrated military command. That was a move that would absolutely stun the Western world and totally reshape the alliance. So yeah, the political drama was far from over. And, behind all these political maneuvers, there was this constant, grim reality. By 1966, the Berlin Wall was 5 years old. And it wasn't just some line on a map. It was a physical scar of concrete and barbed wire running right through the heart of Europe, a daily reminder of the division that defined everything. But here's the flip side. While the statesmen were busy drawing lines on maps, a whole other generation was busy trying to erase them. You could almost say all those anxieties of the Cold War world directly fueled this massive desire for something new, something different. And that created a completely different picture of Europe, one you wouldn't find in politics, but in melody, in style, and in a search for escape. I mean, you can practically hear the generation gap in the music. In Italy, the biggest cultural event that February was the Sanremo Music Festival, and it crowned this classic, grand, super romantic ballad as its winner. But at the exact same time, the clubs and radio waves were being taken over by beat music and French yé-yé pop. That's ya-ya pop, by the way. This catchy, upbeat style that was sweeping the youth off their feet. This was music driven by electric guitars, rebellious energy, and a whole new attitude. And this new wave, it was so much more than just music. It was a total cultural package, a whole vibe. We're talking mod fashion on the streets, these zippy little Mini Coopers flying through the ancient roads of Rome and Paris. It was a generation that suddenly had spending power, and they were happily trading their parents' taste for opera for something way more immediate and exciting. Okay. So you've got these two parallel worlds, right? The gray, tense world of politics and this vibrant, colorful world of youth. But where did they meet? Where did they collide? Well, it happened in the most powerful art form of the time, the cinema. Honestly, you couldn't find a better snapshot of Europe's divided soul than these two films. On one side, you had France's A Man and a Woman, the ultimate, stylish, romantic escape, complete with this gorgeous bossa nova soundtrack. And on the other side, the Battle of Algiers. It was visceral, politically explosive, and felt more like a real-life documentary than a movie. And that right there just shows you how potent art could be.
The Battle of Algiers was so raw, so politically charged in how it showed the Algerian war for independence that the French government banned it immediately. They basically decided it was too dangerous, which just highlights these deep, unresolved post-colonial wounds that were still simmering right under Europe's modern surface.
And this really gets to the heart of what was going on. While the politicians were busy building walls and boycotting meetings, a totally different kind of diplomacy was at work. Let's be real. A catchy pop song or a cool new fashion trend was crossing borders way more effectively than any diplomat ever could. And the reach of this culture was just incredible. Think about it. A teenager in, say, East Germany or Czechoslovakia couldn't just travel to the West. But what they could do was secretly tune their little radios to stations like Radio Luxembourg. And those sounds of the new wave, the beat music, the pop songs, they were leaking right through the Iron Curtain, proving that no wall is strong enough to stop a good melody. So, when you put all of these pieces together, what you see is a continent that is truly at a crossroads, one that's being pulled in two powerful and completely opposing directions.
So in the end, February 1966 wasn't just another month on the calendar. It was a flashpoint. It was this moment of transition where the established old world of generals like de Gaulle was being directly challenged, not by another army, but by a brand new generation of pop stars, fashion designers, and filmmakers.
Which leaves us with this one big question to think about. Was this moment the last great stand of old Europe, the final peak of its power and influence? Or was it the true beginning of the new Europe, the one whose cultural echoes we are still feeling today? You know, the answer is probably a bit of both, which is exactly what makes it such a fascinating moment in time.